Let's see if it works. Okay, we are now live broadcasting for Tech Talks. This week, we are very lucky to be joined by Heather Morgan from the Spokane Falls Community College Library. And I asked Heather if she would be willing to join us because she and I had a conversation a little while ago about some cool video streaming services that they had available at the library. And that kind of got us on the topic of using film and video for instruction. And I asked her if she could come and talk about some of that. So she agreed, and I'm very excited about this topic. It's super cool. So Heather, I'm gonna let you take it away and then let me know when you want me to jump in here.
Well, I'll hop in right away and just say, I get a lot of questions from faculty on, hey, is this okay to do it online? And because a lot of the things that we do in person maybe not be okay either, but when we're doing it online, now there's a record of it. So I personally am looking forward to hearing, the experts here, Heather, and I know Charday is an expert as well, about, fair use, sharing things online. When are you covering your tail, and what is best practices really? So thanks for joining us, and hopefully we can clarify a lot of questions coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
That I'm always horrible at answering. So
well, I mean, we could just jump right in there, Heather, if you want, because you had asked me if I could at least be prepared to talk about that subject before you jump in, and I'm happy to do that. We should start by saying I don't think anybody in here is a copyright lawyer, which is always the first thing we need to get out of the way. You should not listen to us for legal advice, which is why we're going to kind of take a different tactic here. So to start off, as Ben said, there is something called educational fair use, which is a very complicated legal theory about when it is and is not okay to use copyrighted material for educational purposes. The really short answer is instructors have a lot of freedom when they're in a physical classroom with students who are enrolled in their class. They can show nearly any piece of copyrighted material for educational purposes in the classroom with students, as long as it's not available to the public, it's not being copied and distributed. You have a lot of freedom when it comes to that. But then, yeah, the question is, do those same fair use freedoms extend to online classes? And the answer to that is, literally, that's the answer. I did some research on this, and very smart legal minds have said, we don't know for sure. The law is very fuzzy and gray about that. Is a online classroom space in Canvas, does that count as a classroom? I would say yes. Many people would say yes. Some people say, well, we're not so sure. We're not going to spend a bunch of time on that just because it's a really fuzzy gray area that we are not professionally equipped to give you all the answers for. The great thing, though, is Heather has some resources and ideas that basically help us avoid that question entirely. And that's honestly probably the safest option, is if we have ways to legally share videos and films and documentaries to our online students, then that's the easiest, safest option. So let's see what's available for us to do that first, and then go from there.
So thank you for having me. The librarians, we love to share the free resources that we have available to our faculty and staff, and thereby also the students. And once again, just to reiterate, as Caleb said, none of us are copyright experts. I know a lot of people come to the library for that. And we are not experts. We just get asked the questions a lot. So we've done a lot of reading. But as I said, we have a lot of reasonable options for people to use videos in their online classes. And I'm mostly going to be focusing on, students getting access to films, be it face-to-face or online, but not in a synchronous session is really what I'm thinking about. So the first thing to say is I'm going to talk about some options that you have through libraries including not just SFCC or SCC library, but also Spokane Public Library, which all students, staff, and faculty within CCS have access to. And then also some options that we have on the free web. So the first one I would focus on is talking about when to use films. I just thought it would kind of, before we jump in where you can find them, like why would teachers even want to use films? I think a lot of people sit there and they realize, well, I want to use films because for us at SFCC, we have a number of film studies classes. So that's pretty obvious, right? You're going to have to use films for film study classes. But also in general, there's a lot of content that film covers that can be applicable across so many different disciplines. I mean, you have concepts of like how-to videos and things like that, but I'm going to focus more on like documentaries, like longer length documentaries and feature films. And there's just so many reasons why you might need that to illustrate perhaps a concept in your class, or even just for character studies or some type of interpretive lessons, you know, if you're in English or even in other sociology classes, how are different groups depicted? I know a lot of questions I get asked for films at SFCC is for our intercultural communication classes. You know, they're asked to watch films coming from other countries or cultures that might enlighten them about different ways people live, and even foreign language classes, right? It's even great for brainstorming. This happened to me in a class the other day. I had a new subscription that I'm going to show you in a moment, and a bunch of students just with us talking about, hey, did you watch that film? It was great because of this, actually led to a lot of great conversations about topics you could use for papers or speeches in your class. So it was a really nice way to get conversation going in the classroom around different topics, just by looking at different films that were out there and what people had enjoyed. So don't just think, I don't teach film studies, I don't need to use films. There's lots of ways to engage your students because information is in so many forms nowadays. You know, don't overlook films as an option for you. So the first ones I want to focus on are what we offer at SCC and SFCC libraries. And so these are databases, I call them databases because they're found on the database page, where you can find different films that you can then link your students to. So you can provide them a direct link to an individual video within Digital Theater Plus or within Alexander Street Plus or within Swank. So you don't even have to worry about your students trying to find the video you want them to watch. You can embed it usually in Canvas. You can give them a direct link. And there's no borrowing limits. It's not like, oh, they've hit their 8 borrowing limits for the month, we can't watch it. Through SFCC and SCC library, these streaming sources, unlimited use. So you don't have to worry about that. I will say the cons to it is you have to log in to use them, which honestly, once you know what your login is, you shouldn't have difficulty. But some students don't know about their Bigfoot login. You know, I think that's something we've probably encountered, you know, with our students. They don't always know which login they're supposed to use. And we also do have tech glitches from time to time because these are services that we have to renew every year. And so, you know, if something just gets slightly out of whack or something between one department, you may suddenly find, wait, I can't get in for a moment. Contact one of the librarians and we'll figure out what's going on. Digital Theater Plus, SCC and SFCC both have access to it. And this is a lot of stage productions, a lot of plays. And besides having Shakespeare, they also have like David Mamet and other current playwrights coming from different areas. And not only do they have full stage productions there, they also have interviews and masterclass type of sessions and things like that. And a lot of these are closed captioned. That's the other thing about the library streaming services. They tend to have accessibility criteria or options available to them. So you will have some closed captioning options, etc. Alexander Street Press, also available at SCC and SFCC. They have more your educational content, you know, sort of your shorter videos that are very educational, not necessarily your feature films. So be aware of that. And then this currently is only available at SFCC, but we now subscribe as of this quarter to Swank, to their top 500 feature films. And this is only possible because of funding from the film studies students at SFCC and SFCC ASG. This is not being funded by the library. We're just acting as, you know, the access point. But the funding is coming just from SFCC, hence why it's only available to those students at this time. But it has 500 feature films that are the most often licensed by colleges. So it's not a collection that we have put together, but it came about because a lot of the films that the film studies instructors were using were part of this collection, plus a lot more. So,
and I should say it's a really excellent list too. If you look at that, there's some of the most culturally significant feature films in history are part of that collection and available through this system. And like you said, it's only SFCC right now, but I would love to see some SCC faculty start putting some bugs in some ears about how cool this would be for them to have access to.
Yeah. I was just telling Caleb yesterday that I had run statistics on how much use Swank had gotten in like the 1 month that we've subscribed to it. And we already had 386 views, which for like videos through the library is a huge amount of viewing. And I would say a little over 50% of that I would attribute to class assignments, you know, as in you can see that 30 people were watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So I'm assuming that was for a class. But at the same time, there may have been other students using other films for classes, you know, because that's what they've selected or something like that. So to access all of these, you would have to go through the library's website. And so here's just a little screenshot of some of the stuff from Digital Theater Plus. You can see we've got some Broadway shows, we've got some Shakespeare. We also have through Swank, these are some of the titles, just a little screenshot. I mean, it's got Indiana Jones, but you also have Witness, V for Vendetta, Us, just was, you know, a recent film. I think the top one, like number one, because I have the list of sort of like, I guess their order of popularity. Do the Right Thing is number one on the list. And so you have like Do the Right Thing, Green Book, so many, some documentaries, foreign films, a great variety. Now, besides our library, all CCS staff, students, and faculty can get Spokane Public Library cards. You do not need to live within the city of Spokane to have access to this. Because you are part of CCS, you can have access to this. And at the bottom of this slide, which we will make available to you, there are instructions about how you go about getting your SPL card online. You don't even have to go to a physical library to get it. So if you have online students that are not even located anywhere in Washington State, they can still get an SPL card to access these resources. And once you have your card, you can then set up accounts with Canopy and Hoopla, which are their two big streaming services. Canopy offers access to 30,000 plus films. And I'm going to say a lot of these are very aimed at like documentaries and things that easily translate into the classroom. I know I've had a lot of instructors that, you know, have been looking for films that we've been able to find through Canopy, like Misrepresentation, Smoke Signals. Those are available through Canopy. The one caveat with that is that when you use Canopy or Hoopla, you are going to have borrowing limits per month. So Canopy, a student, well, anyone can only have 8 checkouts a month. So basically, when you check out a film, you get it for 72 hours. And once you've done that 8 times, you're up for the month. It'll reset at you know, the beginning of the next month. There's no way to buy more credits or anything like that. So, you know, if all of a sudden all instructors were relying on Canopy, you would have some access issues for students. Okay. Same thing for Hoopla. Hoopla has movies, television, audio books. They have a greater variety of streaming formats, but they do have movies and television that you can incorporate. And a lot of these will even have like PBS shows and things like that, because I know a lot of times we love our PBS, don't we? So another caveat with Hoopla is Hoopla has a daily borrowing limit district-wide. So they encourage you to either start doing your downloads like at 12:01 a.m., because do them early in the morning, because once they hit that district wide, they just stop downloads for the day. You get 10 checkouts a month, but they're going to stop for the day. I feel like Ben kind of had a little like, look there. It all has to do with licensing agreements and the costs. Something we haven't mentioned, a big reason that, for instance, SCC doesn't have access to Swank and like SFCC didn't have access to Swank was because of the cost of it. I don't mind sharing with Swank. For $9,000, I could only get access to 62 films for 1 year. I mean, so obviously there are different licensings based on different platforms, but streaming costs a lot of money at the institutional level. So when we're sitting here, we're saying we have approximately this many thousands of people that could use this service. We're getting charged by how many students we have enrolled and things like that. So the costs are very expensive. So just to be aware of that. I don't know if people realize that.
Heather, can I also add?
Please.
And we don't own the way that licensing agreements tend to work now. We don't own that content. So in the past, we could buy a DVD and we would own that. But now it's, a streaming video. If it's a single video, it can be $300 for a year or two. And then after that time period, we no longer have access to it. So you also have to think that it's a different dynamic of access.
Yes. And that is unfortunately the way with digital resources and libraries, the way it is that we're just licensing most of our access to content. We don't actually own it. So it's a recurring cost. So I'm just giving you some little like screenshots of what Canopy and Hoopla have. And then last but not least, of course, we have the free web. And prior to that, I think it was actually prior to the pandemic, but they've definitely done this during the pandemic. Netflix has made some of their educational videos available through YouTube. So you don't have to actually have a Netflix account to watch films that Netflix have deemed allowable for educational use. So some of the ones they have are like 13th, Our Planet, the Explain series, the Amend series, the Abstract series. So those you can watch, you can assign those to your students, and they're just freely available through YouTube. There's also one called Popcorn Flicks, which has independent films and documentaries. They're through Screen Venture Media, I think. And so they have access there. And I goofed, the PBS Folk Streams and IMDb should be listed under the other free streaming services. PBS website gives you access to some of their like current things. Just be aware that that changes a lot. So there's not necessarily a consistency there that you can say, oh, this will be here forever for the students to get access to. So just be aware of that. Folk streams would be great for like anthropology or learning about different cultures in the United States. Really interesting. IMDb, for a lot of people, you may have noticed this on your own personal, fun to watch kind of thing through Amazon. They offer free movies and television series with advertisements in them, right? And then we also have like a link here to some additional free streaming services that were put together by the College of the Desert. They had a nice list of things like Vudu and Crackle and Tubi and a number of other like streaming services. Some of them have apps for smart televisions. A lot of them you can just access online. I will say when you get to items on the free web, they may not have the same accessibility features that some of the library streaming services have. So that was just sort of like a quick introduction of some different places you can look for free films that you can get to. Because we did mention this in the beginning, as I said, we are not the experts. There is some guidance online from CCS about copyright, and so that's linked in this presentation. And then we do have 3 copyright officers throughout CCS. You have Carolyn Casey, and you also have the library deans. So that is Jacqueline over at SCC, and at SFCC, we're in the process of hiring a new dean. So, you know, that person will be coming soon. So if you have copyright questions, those actually should go to those 3 people. They are the copyright officers for the college.
And I'll also just quickly mention that I put links to all of those streaming services and that College of the Desert streaming guide. I put links in the description of the YouTube broadcast. So anybody watching this later can access those links there. That streaming guide from College of the Desert is excellent. They've got so many great resources on that list. It's a pretty awesome page that you should definitely check out.
Yeah. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we have a few minutes left.
Yeah, we're not in the big rush here. So if anybody has any comments, questions.
I know it shouldn't be all about me, but of course I have questions.
Please.
I've used a lot of film for literature classes and that kind of thing in the past, but I'm teaching the college success class mainly right now. And I was just, while we were chatting here, looking at Alexander Street and seeing the student success videos there. Are there any, other than TED Talks and generally speaking, like YouTube, really well done college produced videos, is there any place that might have some additional resources about all the kinds of skills that students need, both, the time management as well as the sort of mindset kinds of things that might be helpful?
So I think what you've named are excellent resources already. Canopy may, because they do have some educational videos in there. And when I say educational in this context, I mean education as a discipline, not as a genre, if you will. They do, but I'm not, don't quote me on this one yet, but I do know that the public library, like I said, we have access to Spokane Public Library. They have access to, it used to be called Learning Library or Learning Express. Sharday can remind me of what it was, or College Prep Express. Anyway, Angela, I can always email that to you. But they had like quizzes and like study guides in there to help you with different skills. They may have some videos in there. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
That is something to remind people that a lot of our library databases may have videos built into them. I just wasn't focusing on that for this because they tend to be, sort of like your shorter clips.
Wonderful. Thanks. I'll do some looking around. My apologies. I need to run to another meeting, so I'll see you later.
Hey, Angela, before you run off,
Yeah.
Khan Academy has a series of college success videos as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I can send you a link to one of them. They're pretty fantastic.
That is wonderful. I know I did there was some Khan and Dweck conversations that I've used in the past, but I'd love to see more. Thank you. Wonderful.
Bye, Angela.
Bye.
I guess one thing that I would just briefly talk about from kind of the Canvas LMS side of things is, and you kind of touched on this, some of these services, those links are not necessarily permanent.
Right.
And part of that is like that licensing issue that you're talking about is it costs money for these services to license the films to stream. So they are constantly rotating their collection, especially things like the IMDb TV and those sites. They rotate their collection based on what's cheap for them to acquire for a year or two. So if you are relying on any of those sorts of sites to share movies and documentaries and films or whatever with your students, you just need to get in the habit of double checking each quarter that those links are still active, and then replacing them or updating them if necessary. But some of the other ones are better. Like if it's a direct link to a YouTube Netflix documentary, that link is probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's just something that you need to be aware of if you're putting these into your Canvas courses.
And I would say that's even true if you're using, as we said, even with the library databases, be it through SPL or through us. Because sometimes, like you said, our subscription runs out, our licensing agreement runs out. Honestly, that's how we tend to find out, is usually an instructor says, wait a second, this is gone.
I need this. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are some other individual films that, are subscribed to for different classes between SCC and SFCC. But I think that's something also, as we said, access is an issue. And I don't think many people realize just how expensive it is. And I mean, even when I talk with the public librarians, that was why they had to make changes to their Hoopla account, because it became too costly for them with how many downloads were occurring every day, especially during the pandemic, right? How many people were downloading things. And it became cost prohibitive, and that's why they had to put those limits there.
Right. I guess, and if any instructors, because of this tech talk, think about using some movies or films or documentaries or video clips in their course curriculum, I would love to hear about it. I guess in my mind, the big thing is, it's easy for us to say to ourselves, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense if I'm teaching a film class, without really exploring some of the options for different subject areas. I mean, sure, film, obviously, drama, yeah, literature or English, that makes sense. But really, there's so many films and documentaries and topics that could be applicable for humanities, history, social studies, mathematics, engineering, nursing, and anything in the medical field. There's so many different topics you could explore using film. One activity that I've seen some instructors do really well is what they call OK Stop, where in the class, they will show a movie. So for example, one that I'm thinking of is I had a criminal justice instructor who would show clips or episodes from like Law and Order or CSI or one of these crime dramas, and they would show the episode in their class, and then they would say, okay, stop. And they would pause the video and they say, this thing that just happened in the show, is that realistic? Is it not realistic? What does the real world look like? What are the concepts that we're learning? How do they apply to this piece of media? And every time that instructor has done this, the students love it. They get so deeply engaged in that activity because they love watching videos. They love talking about TV. They love finding ways to apply the stuff they're reading about in class to something that they're seeing on the screen. So it's just a super great activity for engaging students.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, the engagement level goes up, but also for a lot of students, we have to remember different people take in information different ways, and it sticks with you in different ways, so people who are more visual and need to see something or to hear it, using film is, as you said, a great way to make those connections to real life scenarios. I can say I was a history major in my undergraduate, and I took cinema and history, where literally the teacher would show us movies that to illustrate different events in history or what was going on in different places, and that type of thing. So I think it's great. I think students perk up when they hear they get to watch a film.
What do you say to a faculty member who asks, hey, is it equitable for me to ask my students to get a Netflix account or to sign up for Amazon or to rent these shows, these episodes of these movies, because I want them to watch maybe 3 things this quarter? What's your response to that?
I guess it all depends. I mean, I will say, having done work in OER in the past and the cost of textbooks and things like that, sometimes your streaming platforms for 1 quarter are cheaper than a lot of textbooks that you would be requiring of students, right? I'm trying to think right now, like the lowest level for Netflix streaming cost is what, around $12?
$11, $12 a month, something like that.
Something like that.
Probably with a free month too, if they've never signed up before.
Yeah.
Right. So potentially that, let's say they're getting it for 3 months without a free month even, that's $36 for a textbook potentially. And I'm not saying that every student can absorb that cost by any means, but if you're looking at what it might cost them otherwise, for another class, might actually wind up being more affordable than textbooks for some of their other classes. But at the same time, you said, is it equitable to ask them to do that? Not only would a student have to subscribe to the service, but do they have stable internet access? Because these films that I'm showing are about streaming access. It's not about download. I mean, I know sometimes Netflix or Amazon Prime has some ways that you can download and watch offline later, but that still requires some type of stable internet connection at some point to be able to download this and then watch it. So you have to have access to technology. You have to have access to the platform. So I think I think my answer would really be like, it depends. How much are you going to use it? I would say probably if you were a film studies teacher, it might make more sense to say, get Netflix for 3 months, and then it would be up to the faculty to make sure that all their films that they wanted to use were available through Netflix or Amazon Prime. But I would be open to what Ben or Caleb or Sade are seeing, or their thoughts also. I mean,
I would say now is a really good time, if that's a question in your mind, to utilize the SWINK database that we currently have. The fact that we have it, I think, is just amazing. And I know Heather worked with ASG and the film department to be able to get access to those videos and those films. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would kind of experiment with it as long as we have that database for this year. Because I think part of it too is learning where to advocate. So if we're interested in continuing to have a database like this, it's going to require funding potentially, like in this instance, from many different departments. So yes, on one hand, you could ask a student to purchase something, or we could have a conversation on campus about advocating for funding coming from different places as well as another alternative to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, if they get used, then there are ways to find the funding for it. But if nobody's using it or it's not being used to its full potential, then unfortunately those services tend to go away over time. So I'm hoping that conversations like this will generate more interest and more use, and we can keep it going.
And I'd like to also add that, I mean, I know that everybody, we have our library, right? Our SCC or SFCC library. And sometimes even as librarians, we tell students, oh, you should check out Canopy through the public library. And it's not that we want to throw up an extra step for students to try and access information or like another barrier or something like that. But also the fact that we have this partnership with the public library is something that is going to be there for the rest of your life, right? When you graduate or leave SCC or SFCC, you're not going to have access to all of our databases, but you're still going to be able to access all of the resources at your public library. So, I mean, yes, it's helpful for you as an academic, but it's also reminding you that lifelong learning can continue once you leave our wonderful institutions. And even if it's not SPL, wherever you live, you should have access to some public library. And there's a wealth of resources available to you there. So if you learn how to use the public library here, it's a transferable skill.
Wow, Heather, I don't know if we've ever had a mic drop on this tech talk.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to end the show today.
Hey, and
public
our
libraries rock.
year.
Get your library card.
Absolutely, and our year. So congratulations, Caleb, to a successful year of tech.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is our last one for the quarter. And
we
will be back in the fall.
We'll be back in the fall. And of course, thanks to the librarians for joining us and providing us a wealth of information and maybe some inspiration on bringing film and media into our classrooms. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And let us know if you try any of this stuff, because I am always excited to hear real world experiences. All right, see y'all later. Okay, and our broadcast.